Women have always faced difficulties in the working world. From gaining equal rights to earning equal pay, it's been an uphill battle. Some women have had to fight tooth and nail to be in positions of rank and power. So how did women get to where they are today? What have they overcome, and what do they still face? Are women equal in the workforce?
Let's backtrack a bit and take a look at what women have accomplished already. 140 years ago, only 15% of the workforce had a second X chromosome. In the late 1800s, it was very much a man's world.
The lack of female counterparts was due mostly to the fact that only young and unmarried women were employed at the turn of the century. They were limited to a few fields like textiles and teaching, and were expected to leave work as soon as they were married.
The courts didn't exactly help the cause early on. In 1908, Kurt Muller was fined $10 for making a female employee work more than 10 hours a day in his laundry business. Muller challenged the state of Oregon for penalizing him as a business owner. Justice Brandeis sided with Oregon.
This case reduced the number of hours that women could work, citing reasons such as physical weakness and their role as childbearers. It basically justified gender discrimination and the usage of labor laws.
And then there was World War II. When every available man was needed to fight, somebody still needed to make the machinery at home. Who better than the wives they left behind? Women saw action in fields that they couldn't enter before. Industries that had previously barred them suddenly needed their help in the factories more than they needed them at home.
When the war ended, the majority of working women returned home, but the idea of fiscal independence began to grow. Many women realized that there was more they could do than just run a household. The 1940s and 50s saw more women attending college, even though a hefty majority were there to get a Mrs. degree, also known as husband hunting.
In 1963, Congress finally tried to help the cause. The Equal Pay Act gave women the power to sue their employers if they received lower pay than their male counterpart, but put in the same amount of work. Unfortunately, the law didn't help very much, because all an employer needed to do was cite a plausible reason for the pay difference, and the case would be dismissed.
Organizations like the National Association of Working Women and Business and Professional Women's Foundation have carried the banner for equality in the workforce. A recent success for the campaign was the Lilly Ledbetter Act of 2009.
The Lilly Ledbetter Act was the first law in 46 years that was written to patch some of the holes in the Equal Pay Act. Lilly Ledbetter was a retiring employee of Goodyear Tires when she discovered that she had been paid significantly less than her male counterparts for several years. To make a long story short, she sued! The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Goodyear because the statute of limitations under the Equal Pay Act was too short. The lawmakers sought to remedy this injustice for others like Lilly in 2009.
The Paycheck Fairness Act of 2010 was another piece of legislation meant to improve the effectiveness of the Equal Pay Act. It failed to pass Congress when it couldn't garner 60 votes to clear the filibuster. So, where does that leave us today? Women have come so far, but they haven't bridged the gap completely. The wage gap currently stands at women earning 77 cents to a man's $1. While it may never be totally equal, will it ever be equal enough?
been looking at women in the workforce for the last 40 years, okay? And during that time, a lot of changes have taken place. In the 60s and 70s, what had been a long-running change, essentially an evolution towards more and more female participation in the labor market, really switched over as more and more young women began to realize that they were likely to be spending a major portion of their adult lives in the labor market, and then make educational and job training investments accordingly. You know, there's gender segregation in the labor market that's been going on for a long time. But the degree of gender segregation has been declining slowly for several decades, reflecting the changes that we're talking about.
Well, I think women are increasingly represented in aspects of the workforce. Here I am in academia, and I know in my department we try very hard to hire qualified women. When we search for a faculty member, we do our best to encourage women to apply. And yet, women make up well less than 50% of our faculty. So, again, the longer answer to your question is, I think that they are increasingly represented, but there's still segments or sectors, industry sectors, where they're underrepresented.
The field I work in, animal science, like our major, for instance, has more women than men by a long shot. And veterinary school classes are close to 80% women these days. So that's definitely what I would consider a career in agriculture. You know, there's probably certain fields that are more male-dominated. So, for instance, my son's a turfgrass major. There's very few women in that field. You look at even wildlife and fisheries, forestry. Like, I think it's very field dependent. And I don't really know what the reason is. I don't think it's that women cannot do those jobs. But I think there is a difference in the industries. And so I think it's going to take a little longer maybe for women to be more accepted into those.
No, there are still many different categories of work where women are very underrepresented. As far as things more science and technology based, women are still very underrepresented. While they have made some strides, if you look at some of the numbers, they're still very male-centered.
I believe that women are represented in a large variety of workforces, but in certain areas there are more women than there are men in particular areas, such as, say, nursing or probably in hospitality. So there are particular areas where women have higher percentages than in other areas.
Yeah, I think it's getting better. It used to be a lot worse, but now it's definitely changed. I know, like, I recently heard that for medical school, it's 50-50 women and men, so I think it's better.
I don't think that women are hired because of their gender. I think that they're hired because they're as qualified, and they may help increase the representation of their group.
If you're looking, I would feel like they might, in like education, you'd be looking at like the quality of their work, whereas if you're in something that's male dominated, they might like feel the need to fill some women's places to, you know, look better for themselves.
I believe that women do bring something unique to the table, so a lot of companies will hire women for the fact that they have different ideas, different backgrounds that they can bring in order to make the company better. I will say, though, that probably in certain companies they do hire women so that they can boost their numbers.
I think we're still at a point where people feel like they need to hire a certain amount of women because employers will face certain stigmas if they don't have a lot of women employed. So sometimes they will just, you know, employ more rather than having the best employees.
Because of the gender segregation that I talked about, or the occupational segregation by gender, all right? The Equal Pay Act basically said equal pay for equal work. But a big issue 40 years ago, and still somewhat of an issue, is women don't do the same kind of work that men do. All right, in the aggregate. And so this gets back to what I was saying about occupational segregation, that it's been declining, but it's still there.
I am a big believer in the value of a diverse workforce, or a diverse student body for that matter. And so I think that we do benefit, like Penn State would benefit, my department would benefit, if we could increase the representation of, in certain departments anyway, of women.
I think that really the door is wide open. I think people establish themselves in a career area by their work ethic and their knowledge of the subject, and it really how hard they work at it. I think if you're willing to work hard, anything is attainable, and I don't think gender really should have anything to do with it.
What it all comes down to is that the workforce isn't 100% equal between men and women, and it's very possible that it never will be. It was once believed that if women waited patiently for enough women to graduate from college and gain the skills necessary to enter the workforce, equality would follow. Like a pipeline being filled, eventually the pressure would cause progress. Women have come a long way, but education and experience can only bridge the gap so much. If only we could fix it biologically, too.